everybody, and welcome to the Autumn Wind 2017-28 Divisional Playoffs Preview Show. I'm Michael Reeves, head coach of the Los Angeles Rams in the Autumn Wind Football League. The Autumn Wind Football League is a 30-team league with coaches from around the country, and we play Stratomatic football, a card and dice game that has been converted to an online game that is very popular. And I am among 30 coaches in this league. We have completed a 16-game season, and in each one of the conferences, 6 teams make the playoffs. Last week, we had 8 teams play in a wild card round, and now we are down to 8 teams who will play in the divisional round over the next several days, as a matter of fact. And if you go to the league website, a fantastic league website, by the way. You can see the address there above. You scan down here to Autumn Wind News, and you can see the 4 winners of the wild card games, and they were wild, all right. They were all very, very close, very competitive games, and all of the games do appear on YouTube. We live broadcasted all 4 of these games, and we put them all up online. And if you hadn't had a chance to see them, check them out. That's how I got involved in the game a couple of years ago, by watching broadcasts from Tom Cook, who also is a member of this league as well. So let's review the games from last week. If you want to call it the upset, I guess the biggest upset would have been the New Orleans Voodoo, who defeated the Philadelphia Eagles 12-10. So the New Orleans Voodoo, as a 6th seed, have moved on, and they will play over the next couple of days, the Seattle Seahawks, the number 1 seed, who won 16 games this year, 16-0, the first undefeated season in 17 seasons of Autumn Wind history. But we will go over that here momentarily. The second contest pitted the Chicago Bears. This was the second of 2 AFC contests. This was the Chicago Bears taking on the San Diego Chargers, a number 5 seed. So the San Diego Chargers move on a last-second field goal by Robbie Gould as time expired, giving the Bears a 16-14 win at home against the Chargers. So by virtue of their win, the Bears, the number 4 seed, will move on and play the number 2 Dallas Cowboys, who finished 14-1 this season. Last week, our NFC contests featured the Oakland Raiders, who defeated the Carolina Panthers by a touchdown, 28-21. That was a number 3 Oakland Raider team hosting and defeating a number 5 Carolina Panther team. So the Raiders will move on, and they will face their in-state rival San Francisco 49ers, the number 2 seed, who finished 13-3. And the final NFC wildcard game that took place last week was one of the craziest I've ever seen. 7 interceptions, fumbles, turnovers on downs. It was a great game. It was entertaining. It was just kind of crazy with the back and forth. But the St. Louis Rams came out on top, 14-9, over the Miami Dolphins. The St. Louis Rams were a number 5 seed, so they went on the road to defeat the Dolphins. And once again, they will go on the road with a tough task ahead, as they will face the number 1 seed, 13-3, Houston Texans. The Texans were last year's Ooper Bowl. That's what we call our championship game, the Ooper Bowl. They were the runners-up to the Seattle Seahawks. So Seattle, once again, back in the playoffs, number 1 seed, 16-0 season, is going to try to repeat. So as you can see, we actually have the game times for each one of these contests. Saturday, February 10th, that will be a 9:30 contest. Actually, that may have been moved today, so this will be updated. I believe that game time may have been moved, but we'll take a look at that. We see another game slated for Monday. That would be 3 o'clock Pacific time, 6 o'clock our time. There's a game Friday night, 7:30 Pacific time. I will be calling that one. That'll begin at 10:30. And there's another one slated for Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific, so that'd be 1 p.m. It looks like there's going to be 2 games back to back, or actually right on top of each other. I'm going to try to call one of those games, and I'm going to try to get home and call the game Monday between the Bears and the Cowboys. So hopefully we'll get these broadcasts up. If I'm not able to cover them all, maybe we'll get somebody to substitute for these broadcasts. But without further ado, let's go into the most important thing, and that is the games. So let's take a look at each one of these matchups. Last week, I went over all 4 matchups, and just for fun, spiced them up a little bit with some point spreads and an over-under number. And so I think I'm going to toss that one in this time as well. So let's first talk about game number 1 in the AFC, and that pits the New Orleans Voodoo, coached by Butch Schreck. And he was nice enough to continually remind me that his team is the Voodoo, not the New Orleans Saints. It just so happens we have 2 New Orleans teams, the Voodoo and the Saints. We have 2 Rams teams. I coach the Los Angeles Rams, and the St. Louis Rams also are in this game, and they're playing this weekend as well. That's a team coached by Gary Nagata. Now, the New Orleans Voodoo finished the season 9-7 as the number 6 seed, and as this season came to an end, it was actually there was a possibility that an 8-8 team could have snuck in to these playoffs, but the Voodoo got hot in their last quarter and was able to come up with a winning record. And they pulled a mild upset last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. The name of the game for the Voodoo, without a doubt, is defense. They only allowed 179 points on the season. That was the number 2 rated defense, but it just so happens they will be locking horns against the number 1 rated defense in the entire league, and that belongs to the Seattle Seahawks. They only allowed 165 points per game. The big difference between these two is scoring. Seattle was in the top 6 in scoring this year with 429 points. The Voodoo, on the other hand, only scored 290 points, and that actually put them at number 20 in the entire league. So points, they are going to be challenged. They're going to be tough to come by. Both of these teams statistically are top 5 in terms of rush and in terms of pass, and their cards do reflect that. Both of these teams have excellent pass defense cards. It just so happens that Seattle also has an excellent run defense card, whereas the Voodoo have a good run defense card. Either way, those are 2 excellent defenses. Clearly, there's not going to be too many points scored in this game. If it's any reflection, in the first game of the season, at least scheduled, Seattle was able to defeat New Orleans. They traveled to New Orleans and defeated them, but it was only 10-7. So Butch was able to hold his ground with Dennis Crowley, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, the undefeated Seattle Seahawks, and the reigning Super Bowl champions. So if we get a chance to take a look at the offenses for each one of these clubs, and can take a look. We'll go to the standings page, basically. There we go. So if we take a look at both of these clubs, the quarterback for the Voodoo is Cam Newton. And Cam is not a popular player in Stratomatic, especially in his last couple of years. His accuracy has gone down significantly, and what made him valuable to many owners was the fact that if he was forced from the pocket on what we call a must run in the passing column, he used to gain a lot of yards, but now he's got a very pedestrian must run card, so you do not get the benefit of that. This year, he was only able to complete 45% of his passes. He did throw 20 touchdowns to go along with 17 interceptions. In his last game, Butch chose to use Cam maybe a little bit more unorthodox. Instead of managing the game, he threw a lot of passes with Cam. Unfortunately, I don't have that box score in front of me, but he threw well over 40 passes, as I recall. It was really important at this game. Basically, it was a turnover battle just to hold on to the ball. As it turns out, the Saints were able to capitalize on 2 turnovers by the Eagles and safety. So basically, defense created every one of their scores, and it helped that Cam was not throwing interceptions. The team did not fumble. And so basically, to have any chance in this game, Butch has to continue with keeping control of that ball and not turning the ball over. His lead weapon for this club is Latavius Williams, who was a do-it-all running back. He rushed for nearly 1,600 yards and also 550 yards through the air, 71 catches. So basically, he accounted for more than 370 touches for this team, which obviously would be a significant part of this offense. He has just average wide receivers. He has a tight end named Federowicz, who does tend to catch a lot of balls, probably their lead receiver, but their wide receivers are pretty average. Again, their calling card clearly is their defense. Only 5s and 6s on this field. In fact, there are six rated defensive players. That in our game, Stratomatic football, is the top rating that you can have. And it makes a real impact when the role is on the defensive card. He also had 5 5s on this club as well. So this is going to be a challenge for any team when you're facing a club that has only scored 179 points or allowed 179 points. That's, barely over 11 points per game. But on the other hand, you're facing another team here in Seattle that is only averaging 10 points allowed per game. So clearly, on the surface at least, this looks to be a low-scoring game, and it may be reflective of the first game they played, which again was 10-7, Seattle coming out on top in the first quarter of our games. Offensively, Dennis Crowley, head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, is a big Seahawks fan, and on many of his clubs, he has Russell Wilson, and this club is no exception. This year, he was able to complete 53% of his passes for 3,600 yards, 25 touchdowns. He threw 15 interceptions. He also features what we like to call Stratomatic All-Star Spencer Ware, 1,600 yards on the ground and 647 through the air. He very much is a workhorse back. This team does have a couple of deep threats. Nothing really big, outlandish as far as wide receivers are concerned, but Golden Tate and Deshaun, I've got that name wrong, He's got Greg Olson, he's got Golden Tate, and I've written the name down wrong on this. I'll grab this real quick. I wrote a pen that got blurry. There you go, Deshaun Jackson. So he does have 2 deep threats on this club, but nobody really outstanding like a go-to. In other words, he can spread the wealth among 3 different players. Now, on defense, again, we're talking about 5 6s on this defensive club and 4 5s. So Dennis does have a couple of 4s that do play, but he was able to manage the numbers correctly and get an excellent defensive card on both of these teams, on both run and on pass. This will be a tall order for the Voodoo. Don't be fooled by that 9-7 record because they're basically staying in each one of these games. The problem is, offensively, if they go down a couple of scores, it may be over. You have to be patient. You have to hope for some interceptions. You have to create some breaks. And one thing that Butch does is he has a defense that could basically stand there and play upright 3-4 and not have to move, but he moves his players strategically. Of course, if he moves that free safety around too much and Dennis chooses to go over the top with an empty zone, there could be trouble. But Butch does call an excellent defensive game, and now you couple that with a strong defense, with a strong defensive team, run and pass. That's going to be very dangerous. And of course, Dennis is a very, very intelligent Stratomatic player, and he's got the cards on top of that. I have placed this as a crazy over-under is only 29. I have given the Seattle Seahawks an 8-point advantage in this first of 2 AFC divisional playoff tilts. But one thing that we did want to mention in this, Seattle is 6-0 against all teams who made the playoff wild card round or Divisional. But the margin of victory against those clubs is only 42 points. So in other words, his average margin of victory against playoff clubs was only 7. Against the other clubs, he pretty much went to town and destroyed pretty much the non-playoff teams. And in fact, in 3 of those games, 3 of those wins against 6 playoff teams, the margin was only 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points. And the Voodoo was one of those teams. So while you look at a 16-0 team versus a 9-7, and of course now a 10-7 wild card team, you don't want to sleep on this club, because the advantage that the Voodoo have clearly over the other teams that Seattle was able to face this year is a very dominant defense. So I think 8 might be a little bit high. I'm going to give him credit for the fact that you get the 3-point home field advantage, and I'm going to give him 5 because, again, he is 16-0 and one of the best coaches out there. But this could be a very close one, and I certainly believe that 29 is a decent number as far as the over-under is concerned. So that is the first of our AFC tilts. The second, we will travel to Dallas. Dallas, of course, had a bye last week, as did Seattle, while they waited on the winner of the wild card game before them, and that was, of course, won by the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears had quite the turnaround season. This club did not make the playoffs last year and only won a couple of games, and they turned it around to win 12 this year. And their big acquisition was in the draft, and that was through Zeke Elliott, workhorse back for these Bears, 366 carries on the season for 1,700 yards. So, again, as Zeke goes, so too go the Bears. Having said that, they do have another young, talented under-25 quarterback at Marcus Mariota. 52% completion percentage on the year, 18 touchdowns against 15 interceptions. He has 2 excellent weapons. Odell Beckham, who caught 85 passes for over 1,000 yards this year, as well as Emmanuel Sanders. So they've got some very, very good young talent on this club. And what is underrated about this Bears club is their defense. Their defense only allowed 234 points this season, which ranked them 4th in the league. However, offensively, even with these weapons, they only managed to score 315 points, which pretty much put them in the middle of the pack in autumn wind. But again, a good defense. They also have 2 linebacker 6s. Their downfall, however, even though they have a good pass defense rating on their cards, they do have a pretty average secondary. So this could be something that the Dallas Cowboys take advantage of. So Luke Delfume will travel to Dallas to take on Mark LePage, who had an outstanding year and is he's very active on our boards, has basically game stories for each one of his clubs. He thoroughly enjoys this league, and he has built this team to win right now. He made a lot of trades before this season, and he has put together a dynamite club, again, with only 1 loss, and that was to the Seattle Seahawks. And I believe their tie may have been against Grand Rapids. We'll have to look, but I believe that's who their tie was to. We'll take a look. I am kind of curious about that. You always look at that one. Oh, it's Hamilton. I apologize. Hamilton did not make the playoffs this year, but they had a rough schedule. I looked at that, and I'm going to discuss that here a little bit later as far as strength of schedule. This website is so well put together. We actually have people who take the extra time to put together crazy ratings, including strength of schedule. It's a fantastic league. If you're just listening to this for the first time, please do visit that website and get on the list for coming into these leagues. If you're serious about Stratomatic, watch these broadcasts, learn how to play. Lots of leagues are available. We do full drafts, transactions, trades, depth charts, the whole 9 yards, you name it. It is pure football, and it's a lot of fun, and these coaches are terrific. I've really enjoyed my 2 seasons in this league, and this is one of the most well-established in the country with 17 years under its belt. Again, this team is coached by Mark LePage. They managed to score 438 points this season, which put them at number 3. But look at this, 217 points allowed. That also puts them as the number 3 team. So again, when you look at a Seattle that's allowed 165, you look at a New Orleans that has allowed 179. Now you come in with the Dallas Cowboy team that has allowed only 217. There's really not that much of a difference. We're talking like 14 points a game. That's quite a club. These 2 teams, of the 4 playoff matchups, this was the only matchup in which the 2 teams did not play each other during the regular season. So we don't really have anything to go by, a measuring stick, strengths and weaknesses, what could have happened in that game that could maybe tell us what's going to happen in this game. So let's look at the Cowboys offense. Drew Brees, acquisition before the season, 65% completion percentage, among the elite in the league, 30 touchdowns thrown against only 12 interceptions. So you look at a player like Drew Brees, 65 percentage, 30 touchdowns. That looks like an outstanding season. Well, you put him into the MVP column. Well, he's not in the MVP on his own team. The MVP clearing away for this club is David Johnson. 411 carries for 2,075 yards. And if that wasn't impressive enough, 158 catches for another 1,343 yards. And for each one of these games, I'd like to put in a key stat. And again, how could I possibly say, well, you know what, if you stop David Johnson, well, you're going to have a chance to win this game. Well, good luck with that. Because again, he's a weapon through the air, and he's certainly a weapon on the ground. His total of 569 touches on the season in real life would set an NFL record. But what I found interesting was when I saw that number, I thought, gosh, that looks like an outlandish number of touches. Honestly, it is a lot more than the real life owner, but imagine this. I looked it up on Pro Football Reference. James Wilder, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1984, had 492 touches. This is real life. This isn't some robot. This isn't some piece of cardboard that we're playing with some dice. This is a real life person who was tackled, pushed, knocked to the ground 492 times. How did he arrive at this number? So David Johnson rushed 411 times, which again, you look at that number and that seems kind of ridiculous. Wilder rushed the ball 407 times for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in 1984. Now, again, that number looks a little crazy considering we're in such a passing era, but Wilder also had 85 catches. Now, David Johnson had 158 catches. He's dangerous in the flats. He's dangerous in short passes. That's 10 catches a game, for crying out loud. That's an amazing, amazing number. But don't forget your old school players. Some of them put up some crazy numbers too. So while that does look a little outlandish, it is more than 70 touches than the real life record. Again, I think it serves to pay homage to some of these players back in the day who toted the rock, caught the ball close to 500 times, which would account for close to 50% of a team's total touches, total offense. Pretty impressive. So again, you think it's David Johnson and it's Drew Brees' show. Nothing crazy statistically because pretty much David Johnson ate up all the statistics, but they do have a very useful set of wide receivers, including Cole Beasley from the real-life Cowboys, the Chris Hogan, who he actually made a trade with me as his second wide receiver, and also tight end, very useful, James Witten from from the Dallas Cowboys. So let's look at their defense. Again, Chicago Bears run a 4-3. They have a good run card and a good pass card. The Dallas Cowboys have a good run card and an excellent pass card. They do run a 3-4. Their defensive backs run 6-5, 5-6. But interestingly, if there is a weakness, is their D line. Their 2 defensive ends are 4s, and their nose tackle is a 5. So on the surface, you have to think the Bears obviously are scouting the Cowboys. It's going to be the Zeke Elliott show, and maybe even a little bit of Marcus Mariota. sprinkled in with some end runs. Or maybe they come out and surprise. Maybe they pick on some of the flats when they start to feel that Dallas is starting to clog some of those linebucker and off-tackle zones, or maybe even end run. Bring some linebackers up to bring some heat just to put a little scare into Ezekiel Elliott. But again, on the surface, by the looks of this game, the Bears are going to have to catch some breaks, obviously, but also, too, they're going to have to run the ball, control the offense. They're not a high-scoring club. So Luke Del Fiume is going to have to control the offense, keep the turnovers down to keep this game close, and perhaps pull the upset on the road in Dallas. I have a 41-point over-under and a 7-point spread to the Cowboys, of course, giving them 3 points for their home field advantage. So there is your two contests for the AFC. And, of course, the winner of those two clubs will play in the AFC Championship the following week. So now let's travel over to the NFC. And I'm sorry, I know I'm doing a full screen here, but I think this is more of a broadcast podcast as opposed to something that is to be seen. But anyway, I'll just put the standings page on here, and if there's some help I need statistically, I'll come back and grab it. So let's go back to their website here. We'll take a look at the matchups one more time. So as you can see, in the NFC, we have the St. Louis Rams, the number 5 seed, traveling to the number 1 seeded Houston Texans, who were the Super Bowl runners-up last year to the Seattle Seahawks, and they will be playing Sunday. And we have the Oakland Raiders, the number 3 seed, traveling down the highway to San Francisco to take on the 49ers, and that game will take place tomorrow. Today's Thursday, tomorrow Friday evening. So let's take a look at the standings. We'll keep that on the screen, and let's take a look at the matchup. So let's first talk about the Houston Texans, who will be hosting the St. Louis Rams. Again, the St. Louis Rams last week in a wild contest in which their quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, was picked off 3 times, but their defense was able to intercept Miami Dolphins quarterback Matt Moore 4 times. Both teams were very aggressive when it came to going for it on 4th downs, and both of them gambled and lost, in fact, on several of them. There was another interception that the Rams had in which the returner fumbled the ball right back to Miami. So it was a crazy, disjointed game, but it was still very, very entertaining, and the St. Louis Rams came out on top. So let's look at those Rams. They are coached by Gary Nagata. This year they were able to score. Let's look at this right over here. St. Louis Rams, there they are. As you can see, there's 3 teams in their division who won double-digit games. They were able to score 336 points this year, and they allowed 300. Offensively, they are the number 12 team in the league. Defensively, they are the number 11 team in the league. The Houston Texans, of course, who had a bye at 13-3. They are coached by Nathan Baylor. They are a prolific offensive team, scoring 443 yards while letting up 279. Last year, their quarterback was Case Keenum. This year, a little bit of an upgrade, unless you count next year's card. I guess Case Keenum's going to have a better card probably than Dak Prescott next season. But in the draft, they were able to select Dak Prescott, who had a statistically crazy season. He only completed 53% of his passes. And I only say only because if you look at the crazy numbers next to it, 42 touchdown passes thrown versus 7 interceptions. So quite a ratio for the rookie quarterback, Dak Prescott. Their running back, their main feature back, is Lamar Miller. This league is full of workhorse running backs, and Lamar Miller is no exception. I think to get to this level, you have to have a running back who can get you 5 yards a carry. Lamar is no exception. He rushed for 1,900 yards this year, along with a 5.1 per carry average. His main weapon, this being Nathan's main weapon, would be A.J. Green, who is the lone receiver on the club to eclipse the 1,000-yard mark. But don't sleep on deep threat Sammy Watkins, who averaged 18 yards per catch. So switching over to the St. Louis offense, again, a little bit more restrained. They were in the middle of the pack offensively. Big Ben this year was able to complete 56% of his passes, so he actually completed a higher percentage than Prescott. He did throw 22 touchdowns, but he did throw 18 interceptions. So clearly that's something that Gary's going to want to avoid in this next game. His feature back is Mark Ingram, who was able to rush for over 1,000 yards, but his per carry average was only 4.2 yards. However, his understudy is Zach Zerner, and the Z-Man was able to eclipse 5.8 yards per carry. So that's a pretty decent 1-2 punch. Weapons-wise, no wide receiver that truly scares you, but a solid effort all around with Tyler Eifert leading the way with 85 catches. Their main wide receivers are Jeremy Maclin and Pierre Garçon, who had 68 catches for Garçon, 65 catches for Maclin. Defensively, St. Louis, average rated running team. They run a 3-4. Their pass defense is good. 2 5-rated cornerbacks, so that's pretty solid. But on the other hand, linebackers a little challenged. They do have 4s at all of their linebacker spots that I could see. It looked like I saw 4s all around. But again, when you're playing a 3-4, you can move that linebacker and make an impact when it comes to stopping the run. And of course, that will be the MO of Gary Nagata, trying to keep Lamar Miller at bay, who does have a very strong card. Same defensive setup for the Texans, whose defense this year allowed 279 points. That was 9th in the league. So good, not great. A good pass defense. But interestingly enough, they have a 4 starting at cornerback. So there is the possibility that Big Ben can make some hay with one of those wide receivers. I'm not sure exactly which one they're going to guard, but maybe Maclin, maybe Garçon. Pierre Garçon could make some impact there against a 4-rated cornerback. The two clubs met this year twice, as a matter of fact. They are in the same division. Texas winning the division with 13 victories compared to 11 for St. Louis. And there you have the Raiders, who also still are in the playoffs. So both of your wild card winners came from that same division, which is called the Lombardi division in the NFC. The Texans allowed 279 points this year. That ranks them 9th. In the meetings that they had, this is interesting. The Rams went on the road to defeat Houston 20-14. Houston paid back the favor when they traveled to St. Louis, defeating the Rams 37-14. So that matchup was a bit of a blowout. The Rams were able to pull off a win on the road in Houston. The key stat that I saw in this game, early on I had mentioned the point disparity, the differential for the Rams versus the Texans. Again, you have 443 points scored for Texas against 279 points. That's a 150-point difference. That's about a 9-point difference per game. And on the surface, when you look at a club like St. Louis, at Gary Nagata's team, only a 36-point difference, 336 points scored versus 300 defensively allowed. That's only a 36-point difference. But as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we have a gentleman who actually keeps statistics so thorough to the point where he has some strength of schedule numbers. And lo and behold, I noticed that St. Louis had the number 1 strength of schedule in the entire league. So I think that could explain the differential between 336 points and only 300. We're talking like a 2-point margin. But if you look at the schedule that St. Louis played, it is chock full of winning clubs. As you can see, they led with the Oakland Raiders and a win there. There's a win against another playoff team, the Carolina Panthers. That's 2. There's a loss to the Miami Dolphins, putting them at 2-1. There's a win over those Houston Texans. That's 3-1. There's your loss to the Oakland Raiders. That's 3-2. And there's a loss to the Seattle Seahawks. That's 3-3. And there's a loss to the Houston Texans, 3-4. So it's not often that clubs are going to take on 7 playoff teams, plus some of these other clubs that they were playing, were not pushovers. Oklahoma Outlaws had a pretty decent season. The New England Patriots had a pretty decent season, but faded down the stretch. The Grand Rapids Rampage had a pretty quality season as well. The Rampage, in fact, the only club with double-digit wins not to make the playoffs. So, in essence, there were 7 playoff teams that they were able to match up with, but there's another 8th team, Grand Rapids, with 10 wins, in which they were able to play and defeat. And there's a Montreal Alouettes team with 7. So they did not play pushovers this year. So to look at the point differential and think, well, you know what, they barely limped into the playoffs. This is a battle-tested team. Nagata is an excellent coach. And while the Houston Texans are the Super Bowl champions, I can see a scenario where this game could get down to the final possession. I do believe there will be points scored in this game. I have an over-under of 41 points, and I have a -5 as the point spread for this contest. So again, Houston has the more talented club, especially offensively, with dynamic weapons like Dak Prescott and A.J. Green and Lamar Miller. But both of these defenses are just so-so. So each one of these teams can make hay against either of these clubs, and a good roll this way or a turnover that way could make a difference. So I'm going to put that spread at 5. So let's go to the last National Football Conference divisional playoff game, and this one features the Oakland Raiders traveling upstate, downstate. I don't know much about geography, do I? Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. San Francisco 49ers. The Raiders finished the season 12-4 and only was able to manage a wild card bid with 12 wins. And the San Francisco 49ers held on to their division, which would be the Walsh division, with a 13-3 record. The Niners are coached by Lawrence Green, and Tim Bowler coaches the Raiders. They are here because of their win last week, 28-21, over the Carolina Panthers. Lawrence Green was waiting for that winner. So let's talk a little bit about Tim Bowler's club. 406 points scored, so offensively, strong. Defensively, pretty strong too. Top 5 defense, scoring points allowed, 265 points allowed. They only matched up one time this year, and Oakland went on the road to San Francisco and defeated the 49ers 17-10. The Niners are coached by Lawrence Green, the number 1 offensive club in the league, 508 points. And in a moment, we're going to see exactly why. They have basically an all-pro team on this club, an outstanding group of receivers. Jay Ajayi, the running back, had an unbelievable year. This is going to be a fun game. I hope that you can tune in and watch, because these teams are going to go up and down the field, no doubt. Also, because Lawrence Green's club allows a fair amount of points. In fact, they are in the lower half, barely, the 16th ranked team when it comes to points allowed at 352. So let's go ahead and give the home team the benefit of the doubt, and let's talk about their offense first. And we would be talking about Sudden Sam Bradford. 62% completion percentage for this club, 43 touchdowns, only 13 interceptions. So an incredible year for Bradford, and clearly one of the MVPs of this league. But you don't have a good number like that unless you've got a reason for the defense to call run, and that's where Jay Ajayi comes in. 1,700 yards, not among the leaders. There were several running backs with over 2,000 yards this year, as I recall, or some that had 1,900 and 2,000. Jay Ajayi had 1,700 yards. It's the 6.4 yards per carry average that is mind-boggling. What a number for Jay Ajayi, an outstanding season. He's backed up by the versatile Rex Burkhead. Here's another statistical anomaly for this club. 3 receivers with 100 catches. And all 3 of these could be ticketed for the Hall of Fame eventually. Julio Jones, the dynamic Atlanta Falcons receiver, with 101 yards. We have Gronk with 127 catches. And now you've got Travis Kelce with 123 catches. Plus, they have another receiver, a good receiver in Randall Cobb. So this is a team that clearly runs the 2 tight end offense. I think you can pretty much bet that. All of them with 100 catches, all of them eclipsed the 1,000 yard receiving mark. So let's look at the offense on the other side. Tom Brady, 61% completion percentage, only 14 touchdowns against 12 interceptions on the year. But you want to talk about another dynamic running back here is LaShawn McCoy, 1,800 yards rushing for Shady, a robust 5.8 yards per carry. He's got a solid backup in Tevin Coleman as well. His lead receiver would be a toss-up between the great real-life Pittsburgh Steeler Antonio Brown, but also Martellus Bennett. Both of them hauled in 76 catches this year. And he does have a solid deep threat in Quincy Enumba, 20 yards per catch. So while the temptation is there to guard Antonio Brown and send that free safety his way for the double team, you leave that free safety open. He can go over the top with Enumba. So let's talk about the defenses. We'll stay with the Bears again. Points allowed, 265. They're among the top 5 in the league. And I think this is a credit, again, to Tim Bowler's defensive play calling. Another one who, when you have an average run and an average pass, you have to anticipate what that other coach is doing. But it's not enough to anticipate when you're running an average defense. You have to go the extra mile and start moving some players around. And that's what this gentleman does. Because he basically has a couple of cornerbacks at 4. He has only one 5-rated linebacker. So he was able to manage an average defense, and yet he was able to coach this team up to the 5th-rated least points allowed defense in the league. That is really impressive, Tim. Congratulations. I think that's absolutely outstanding. And now let's go over to the defense for Lawrence. And again, his is the 16th rated defense in the league. And we're talking about an average defense. So he puts points on the board. He allows points. But again, you still get close to a 10-point margin of victory each and every time his club takes the field. But actually, if you look at Tim Bowler's, he's not too much far behind, basically. We're talking about a 135-point difference versus 150 or so point difference. So again, this could be a very, very close matchup. He runs a 3-4 with an average defense on both sides. He does have a cornerback 6 in Casey Hayward, but he has lots of 4s on this field. So there is vulnerability for both of these clubs. And so that's why I have an over-under that's quite high, actually, at 46 points. And I have a point spread of 6 points, basically 3 points for the home team. So we will give Lawrence Green a 6-point advantage in this game against the Raiders and Tim Bowler. The only statistic I have to share for this, which was more of an anomaly than anything else, San Francisco running backs only caught 2 passes during the entire season. But again, lots of weapons for this San Francisco club. As we had mentioned, we have Gronk and we have Travis Kelce. And we have Julio Jones and Randall Cobb. So basically, that's going to be your go-to guys. Nothing coming out of the backfield unless he surprises us. And he does have Rex Burkhead, who is a good receiver out of the backfield. So we'll see. Maybe he was bird dogging us for 16 games, and he all of a sudden decides to change strategy. 13-3 on the year, facing off against the Raiders. 12-4. So that's it for our divisional round preview show. No predictions, nothing crazy like that. If I was held hostage with a gun to my head, if I was going to pick what I believe could be an upset, nobody's feelings hurt, nobody's feathers ruffled. Of all the matchups, I like the Rams on the road against the Texans. Again, I think that St. Louis team is battle-tested. They have played very tough opponents and played them very well. Gary Nagata is a fine coach. But if you get to this level, you have 8 great coaches. There's no doubt. You can't just play stand-up football here. There's a reason why these coaches are here. There's a lot of talent, no doubt, here. But at the same time, the coaches make a big, big difference. You just can't play with cards and dice and just hope your way to a win. You do have to make some moves. You do have strategy. That's what makes this Stratomatic football game so fantastic, and that's why we enjoy it so much. I do like the Voodoo Seattle game. I don't believe the Voodoo have the offense to challenge. Having said that, if they get the breaks like they did early on against the Philadelphia Eagles, one knows not what can happen. This is a team that can create short fields, but on the other hand, so can Seattle. But I believe they're going to need some breaks to win. I believe these games all will be competitive. I don't see crazy point spreads anywhere. I think they're all going to be a lot of fun. And again, we will be bringing the broadcast to you. If you are interested, take a look at the times. And if you want to get on the live broadcast, I'll try to shoot an email out. But I stream on YouTube. If you put in Autumn Wind Divisional Playoffs and a team name, you should be able to find the broadcast. Of course, if you'd like, you can subscribe to the channel, and it will give you an email. I have subscribed to Dennis Crowley and to Tom Cook, so I know exactly when he's bringing any playoff broadcast to life. So, again, this is the divisional playoffs for Autumn Wind. The winners will face off next week in the conference championships. And, of course, we will follow that up by the 16th edition of the Uper Bowl. This is the 16th season for this league. Please feel free to visit our Autumn Wind website to take a look at the statistics. Everybody remember to download their divisional playoff files and join us this weekend as a spectator or listening to the stream. Again, this is Michael Reeves, head coach of the Los Angeles Rams for Autumn Wind Divisional Playoffs. Hope you enjoy it this weekend. Happy football, everybody. I wish everybody the best, and God bless to all.